Hey guys, Future Dark here, letting you know to buckle up on this video, because it's a rough one. Don't say I didn't warn you. Hello everyone, DarkOfAllTrades here. Today's video is slightly longer than some of the previous ones, so after a brief intro, I'm just going to throw us all into it. This video is from a channel called Christocentric Philosophy, and while it only has a few hundred subscribers, this video alone has over 1,000 views. The video is titled, Why Atheists Cannot Avoid Self-Contradiction. Well, I'm pretty good at avoiding contradictions, self or otherwise. Let's see what he means by this.
Atheists are walking contradictions.
By whose authority are you determining what is a contradiction?
I don't normally like to mix my apologetics videos, but this was just too good.
Everything they do and say contradicts their conviction that God does not exist.
Really? That is quite a sweeping statement. Everything I do and say contradicts my conviction that God does not exist? How does my saying, bacon, 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 contradict my conviction that a God does not exist? How does me doing everyday tasks like washing the dishes contradict my firmly held belief that a God does not exist? I'd really like an answer to these, as nothing about my belief in a God has anything to do with either of those examples. I could believe in a God and still say and do those things. I could believe that your God doesn't exist, but Odin does, and still do those things. I want to say this is a non sequitur, but I'm holding off for just a bit to see if he commits it fully. Wait a minute, this isn't the argument of, if God doesn't exist, then nothing can exist, is it? I hope not.
Stick with me for a moment and I'll explain why this is the case. First, we should note that atheists do not believe that there is a sovereign God who created and sustains the universe.
My goodness! I agree with this apologist. He got the core meaning of atheist right. I think he's the first of all of the videos to which I've responded that has gotten this right, so major kudos to this guy.
In their view, the world is irrational in the sense that there is no rational will ultimately responsible for the events that occur in history.
The first part is not necessarily required for all atheists. One can be an atheist and believe in magic. Any atheist can be an absurdist, that is, subscribe to the philosophy of absurdism, that the universe, and the world included in that, is irrational and meaningless, and that the search for order brings the individual into conflict with the universe. The second part is a bit vague. There is no single rational will ultimately responsible for every event that occurred in history, but all human-caused events have some form of will or agent behind them individually, that is, the human that caused said event. But for the sake of argument, I can grant the second part based on what I think he means. That is, there is no single agent responsible for every event that has ever happened, human-caused or not.
In other words, there is no rational plan according to which the events of history proceed. The world we experience was not predetermined or preconceived.
Another thing I'm not entirely sure I agree with. I'm a determinist, and in some sense, it could be said that I believe that humans do not have free will, and that everything that has happened or is going to happen was set in motion long ago. Everything that we do is based on things outside of our control. Even being proactive is a reaction to a situation or state of being. Some atheists agree and some disagree. If there's interest, I can make a video a little later about why I do not think we have free will. If you want a breakdown now, check out Cosmic Skeptic's video where he talks about this topic. I'll put a link in the description. I think what he means here is that we believe that there was not a mind deciding what will happen before our universe came to be. This I will agree to.
The implication of this is that every fact that is instantiated, every event that occurs, is new. New in the sense that it exists for the very first time.
This is a bit of dicey language. Every event itself is unique. That is, if I go to the store at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, March 29th, 2023, that event has not happened before and will not happen again. It is unique to that one event. I could go to the store again at 4 p.m. that day, and that would be a different, unique event, even if roughly the same actions are taken, and the exact same methods are used from start to finish. A bit of a strange statement, but okay, I'll go with you on this. Where are you going with this?
If there were a rational, exhaustive plan that preceded the facts of the world, then they would not be new, since they would exist first and foremost as part of this exhaustive plan, even before they are actualized in the temporal realm.
Oh wow, no. What you're doing here is a fallacy called mistaking the map for the territory. You are saying that because there is a plan for something to occur, then when it does occur, it is not the first time it has happened because it happened in the plan. This isn't the case. If you decide something is going to happen and then it happens, the event itself still has only occurred once. For example, if you make a plan to punch a brick wall, and within that plan, you plan for your hand to hurt proportionally to how hard you plan to punch the wall, when you punch that wall and your hand hurts, how many times did your hand hurt from that event of punching the wall? Just once. The plan for the event to happen is not the event happening. The plan is the map, the event itself is the territory.
But that cannot be the case given atheism, so every fact is new. And if every fact is new, it follows that every fact is a brute fact.
I don't think this guy knows what brute fact means. A brute fact is a fact that cannot be explained by something more fundamental. When it comes to discussions, it is something that we don't have or don't need an explanation for. That is, in very simple terms, a brute fact is something that just is. The fundamental laws of nature are brute facts. The axioms of mathematics are brute facts. The laws of logic are brute facts. Every new event, especially in a deterministic universe, has something that preceded it. It is another brute fact, the law of cause and effect. So if what he was saying were true, then it would mean that atheists would also have to not accept the law of cause and effect, which is not true at all. Maybe he's going to bring up the first cause argument?
It is a brute fact in the sense that it is isolated from every other fact. It is isolated from every other fact because there is nothing that relates it to any other fact.
Okay, is this a serious video? Taking my previous example of going to the grocery store, if we take that as a single event, that does not mean that there is nothing that relates it to any other fact. We can relate it to the fact that I am a human and therefore need to eat. We can relate it to the fact that I enjoy going to the grocery store. We can relate it to the fact that I needed to get out of my house for some reason. All of these facts can be related to the event of going to the grocery store. Again, it is simple cause and effect. Because of X fact, I went to the grocery store. That sounds like a relation to me.
Its actuality is a unique phenomenon that has no place in a larger plan or system. The atheist believes that the world is composed of facts of this nature.
No, this is not required at all to be an atheist. The moment you asserted the atheist believes, you were already wrong unless you continued with that they do not accept the proposition some number of gods exist. One simply being an atheist tells you nothing about what that person believes outside of that single position on that single proposition. Even the hard atheist position is not required to believe this. The hard atheist believes that no gods exist and could believe that the universe is irrational. There is no conflict here, so this is a big wrongo.
Wrongo.
It is this irrational world the atheists believe we live in. So it is this irrational world that atheists seek to know, understand, and make intelligible. Whenever the atheist speaks, thinks, or argues, he is presupposing that he can make intelligible assertions about the world.
I am almost befuddled that one would even make this statement out loud as if there were a differentiation between atheists and theists in terms of how we interact with reality. My dude, as I said before, the laws of logic are brute facts. We presuppose them for a number of reasons, one of which is their constant reliability under scrutiny. By accepting reality and laws of nature on top of these, we are already in a position where thinking, speaking, and arguing can include intelligible assertions. I don't even need much. Just grant that language exists and that we generally speak the same language, and all of this falls into place. But sure, we presuppose that when I say something to someone, I'm making an intelligible assertion about the world, namely that I am indeed speaking and that there is someone there to hear what I say. I think I could make a pretty strong case for all of this if we ignore the problem of hard solipsism. If we don't, then you don't exist anyway, so I'm still right, as there is no one else around to show that I'm wrong.
So the atheist believes two things: that the world he inhabits is the way it is, not in virtue of the will of a rational being, and that he can predicate intelligibly about this world. But these two beliefs are mutually exclusive, landing the atheist in inevitable self-contradiction.
While I don't know what unusually exclusive means, I'll take it to mean mutually exclusive. Let's take a look at the two beliefs he mentioned and see if that is the case. 1. The world he inhabits is the way it is, not in virtue of the will of a rational being. 2. He can predicate intelligibly about this world. I don't see the contradiction, No will is required for the existence of the universe, but even if it were possible that a will could be required, this would need to be demonstrated, not just asserted. So, at absolute best, we could say, we don't know if the will of a rational being is required for the universe to exist. From there, we could still make assertions about what we perceive in reality. We can still say the laws of logic are brute facts. I was right that he's basically saying if there is no God, then there can't be anything else. In this case, he's focusing on rationality. It seems like we're just dealing with the presuppositional apologetics. I covered why they are logically fallacious in one of my Professor Dark Explains Logical Fallacies videos, but since I have been seeing it more and more, maybe I'll make a standalone video dedicated to taking down presuppositional apologetics. It is arguably the worst form of apologetics. You basically assert that a God is required for anything as a brute fact, and then you win. A God is required with no explanation needed, therefore God exists. God exists, therefore God exists. Just awful logic.
To make assertions about the world, the atheist requires a system of concepts. One cannot say anything about anything without a system of concepts.
Sure, I can grant this. In order for anyone to say meaningful words, we have to have some sort of concept attached to those words. However, simply because atheists don't accept that a God exists doesn't mean we don't have concepts or ideas. If a God exists or doesn't exist, we still have the brute facts listed before and many others. What you would have to argue is that a God is required for these brute facts, thereby having a more fundamental explanation, thereby making them no longer brute facts. So, while the argument hasn't been made, either there are brute facts like the laws of logic and the axioms of mathematics, or there aren't. But that is what presuppositionalists often argue, that their God is the only brute fact needed, and they don't need to back this up, other than saying it's a brute fact, which means there are two brute facts. But that also is contingent on a God, which is a brute fact as well, and we're in a vicious cycle. I really don't like presuppositional apologetics.
You cannot talk about trees without the concept of leaves, or barks, or roots, or plants, or the color green, or a host of other individuative concepts. In talking about or thinking about anything, one's assertions will take the general form X is Y, where X is the particular thing being talked about, and Y is some concept. So a system of concepts is required to talk about or think about the world. But concepts are peculiar in that they are timeless and therefore not subject to change.
Yes, and why is that? Because they are abstract objects. They don't exist in reality. They are imaginary things that only quote-unquote exist in a person's mind. If you think of a tree, that tree itself does not exist, even if it mirrors a tree in reality. The concept is not physical, unlike the actual tree.
The concept of the color red, for example, applies to the red car that was produced years ago and also to every red thing that will exist in the future. So concepts transcend time, space, and change. If the atheist claims to use his timeless system of concepts to talk about the world, which, as we have noted already, is filled with brute facts, then he is virtually claiming to be able to do the impossible, which is to relate facts that are inherently unrelated.
As I've shown before, while there are brute facts, many things are still related to each other. I don't know why he seems to think we can ignore the idea of cause and effect. Such a fundamental miss that it calls into question his philosophical skills. If there is no God, then cause and effect is no longer a law? Is that the claim here? Or if there is no God, then no event or fact is related to another event or fact? So weird that he throws everything out, even abstract concepts, if there is no God. This is not what atheists believe at all.
If the world is filled with brute facts, then no concepts can apply to them.
What are you talking about? First of all, literally no one thinks the world is filled with brute facts. There have to be non-brute facts, otherwise we wouldn't have that distinction. We would just call them facts. We have explanations for why I went to the store. We have an explanation for why my car is red. We have explanations for why I can write this script. Those are not brute facts. Second, if something has no more fundamental explanation for its existence, that doesn't mean we can't apply concepts to that thing. For example, a potato is a potato. That is a brute fact, based on the first law of logic. Already, I've taken the brute fact of the law of identity and added a concept to it to help us visualize it. We can even add another concept of a brown potato is a potato. Another brute fact is based on the original brute fact, but we have added a concept, the fact that it is a brown potato rather than a Yukon Gold or a red potato. Now maybe this isn't actually what he means, so I'll let this one slide for now.
And consequently, no intelligible assertion can be made about them.
Are you saying that brute facts can have no intelligible assertions made about them, or that this is the case if we cannot apply concepts to brute facts? I am seriously lost here. If everything is a brute fact which you claim atheists must believe, then everything just is. Then that is it. Everything just is because they just are. This is literally presuppositional apologetics for reality rather than God. Everything that exists just exists. No explanation needed. That wouldn't change the fact that things still exist. There is an intelligible assertion about the thing that exists. It exists. Are we done here?
If a concept applies to a fact, then even prior to its actualization, that fact is related to numerous other facts.
I had a hard time trying to understand exactly what he's saying here and had to turn on the captions. And this is what he seems to have said. Let's look at this practically. A potato is a potato. That is a brute fact. A brown potato is a potato. Another brute fact. The concept of being a brown potato applies to the fact that a potato is a potato. Prior to brown potatoes existing, they are related to numerous other facts? Is that what you're saying? Maybe I'm missing something or I'm not smart enough to get something hidden here, but does this make a good argument? A concept that applies to a fact such as the color red to a red car existing, then prior to the red car existing, the car is related to numerous other facts? Is that what's being said here? Leave a comment if you can break this down further. Maybe it's a brute fact.
But as we have already observed, brute facts are isolated from every other fact by their very nature, so no concepts can apply to them.
No, not at all.
Let me see what you have.
A brute fact!
No!
Brute facts are just facts that cannot be explained by more fundamental explanations. They are not unrelated to every other fact. Otherwise, the laws of logic would be unrelated to every other fact. But they aren't. We break things down to the 3 laws of logic regularly. If a brown potato is not a potato, then we are relating a potato to the law of logic. Specifically, an example. Reality is a brute fact, but we can relate all sorts of things to reality. Physics is related to reality. The laws of nature are related to reality. On and on.
The atheist believes that every fact is a brute fact.
Of course not. I've already shown this is 100% not the case. An atheist is not required to hold a positive belief on anything just to be an atheist. One could be an absurdist and think the universe doesn't make sense, or one could be an infinitist and think that things just have an infinite change of reason, just not a god. For example, if we assume that time is infinite in both directions, then we don't need a starting point because there actually isn't one. There is a starting point to our local presentation of the universe, but we don't know before then. If the hypothesis is true, then no God is required, nor are there any brute facts.
And he also believes he can predicate intelligibly about the facts. But no intelligible assertion can be made about brute facts. So whenever he predicates, whenever he talks about the world he experiences, the atheist is contradicting his own suppositions. It is this supposition of the non-existence of God that gave rise to the idea of brute facts.
Citation needed. We didn't know why some things were the way they were for all of human history. Why is there fire? At one time, we didn't know. It just existed, and that was enough for people at the time. Before the idea of a god, there were people interacting with their environment and just accepting that some things existed.
If the atheist were consistent, he would be unable to speak intelligibly about anything. He cannot avoid this, however, and as such, he cannot avoid contradicting himself anytime he speaks or thinks. I will end this by quoting a passage from Van Til's writings which perfectly summarizes what has been argued here. Quote, "On the assumptions of the natural man, logic is a timeless impersonal principle, and facts are controlled by chance. It is by means of universal timeless principles of logic that the natural man must, on his assumptions, seek to make intelligible assertions about the world of reality or chance. But this cannot be done without falling into self-contradiction. About chance, no manner of assertion can be made. In its very idea, it is the irrational. And how are rational assertions to be made about the irrational? If they are to be made, then it must be because the irrational is itself wholly reduced to the rational. That is to say, if the natural man is to make any intelligible assertions about the world of reality or fact, which, according to him, is what it is for no rational reason at all, then he must make the virtual claim of rationalizing the irrational. To be able to distinguish one fact from another fact, he must reduce all time existence, all factuality, to immovable timeless being. But when he has done so, he has killed all individuality and factuality as conceived of on this basis. Thus, the natural man must on one hand assert that all reality is non-structural in nature, and on the other hand that all reality is structural in nature. He must even assert on the one hand that all reality is non-structurable in nature, and on the other hand that he himself has virtually structured all of it. Thus, all his predication is in the nature of the case self-contradictory. End quote.
For those who didn't catch the name, he quoted at length Cornelius van Til, a Dutch philosopher and theologian who's considered the originator of modern presuppositional apologetics. This long quote, which I had to suffer through multiple times to get this, basically boils down to these 5 points. 1. Man seeks to understand reality, and by doing so must make assertions about reality. I can grant this, we're just going to keep going. 2. Chance is irrational. This is absurd. We understand chance very well. 3. If we can make claims about the irrational, then it must be rational. This cannot be true. Something cannot be rational and irrational at the same time. That violates the second law of logic. He then effectively asserts that 4. In order to distinguish one fact from another, there must be a God. This is kind of the base of presuppositional apologetics. This claim needs to be demonstrated, but apologists are never able to do so. The quote effectively ends by saying, 5. In order for an atheist to be an atheist, he must admit there is a God, thus contradicting himself. So many issues with this big long quote. Feel free to go back and read it. I don't recommend it. It is basic presuppositional apologetics from the mid-1900s dressed up in a lot of complicated language. Here's how I counter presuppositional apologetics. I presuppose that a God doesn't exist, yet we still perceive things. Every confirmed explanation we have for literally anything is natural. In order for a theist to claim a God exists, they would need to borrow from secular logic, presupposing that a God does not exist, thus contradicting themselves. Is this convincing to any theists? Probably not. Is it even a good argument? No, but it uses the same logic that presuppositionalists do. And that's the end of the video. What did you think? Do you think that being an atheist is a self-contradictory position? Or do you think that the fact that we don't believe in a God can be related to other facts, like evidence? Let me know in the comments below. I assert that we don't need an explanation for the like button, and in fact, it is a fundamental part of this platform, with no more fundamental parts making it a brute fact. If you haven't done it already, what are you doing? Trying to show that the subscribe button is unrelated to any other fact in reality? I presuppose that people supporting me on Patreon will help me make more videos faster. Therefore, my Patreon at patreon.com/DarkOfAllTrades must exist. As always, keep learning.